If you think that all modern cars look and sound much the same, oh boy, have we got a treat for you today. We dig beneath the skin of the Lexus LC500, one of the most strange and beautiful cars on sale today, and explain why we may never see its like again. So turn up those speakers in 3, 2, 1.
This car could and probably should have been rubbish. No, really, hear me out on this one. It's a grand touring car aimed unashamedly at the US market, but built in Japan. Ever seen the film Lost in Translation? Yep, that in reverse. It would have been so easy for Lexus to have got the LC500 so wrong, to turn out a flabby barge loaded with shiny trinkets. You suspect that the temptation was there. Look at the old SC430 Coupe for evidence of that. But something happened, and instead of building a chintzy boulevardier, Lexus built something weird and wonderful.
Perhaps it's because this car was built at Toyota's Motomachi factory alongside the Yaris GR, and that was also the home of Lexus's iconic LFA supercar. Cynics will say, of course Lexus is going to trot out some cheesy line about common DNA, but there is a demented feeling of quality in the LC that is wholly reminiscent of the LFA. The thing that these two cars share in common, it feels like Lexus never built them to turn much of a profit and probably didn't care. It's a statement of capability, if you like, and you're the beneficiary of that. Lexus also offers the 6-cylinder LC500H hybrid version, but don't bother with that car. It's slower, more expensive, and doesn't possess anything like the character of this V8 model.
If the rest of the LC500 wasn't quite so special, you'd call the 5-litre V8 under the bonnet the standout feature. Generating 351 kilowatts and 540 newton meters, it'll propel the Lexus through 100 kilometers an hour in 4.5 seconds. Despite all the carbon fibre used in the build, the LC500 still weighs a chunky 1970 kilograms. That's about 50 kegs less than an entry-level Merc S-Class, so you've got a lot of physics to contend with. Power goes to the rear wheels via a 10-speed automatic transmission, and your $194,757 buys you no turbochargers, no superchargers, or any of that nonsense really. Just a naturally aspirated, Yamaha-fettled 5-litre that has to be one of the best of a dying breed. The interior of the Lexus LC500, it has to be said, is a lovely place. Almost everything you see here is bespoke, whether it's these lovely magnesium shift paddles or the 3 grades of leather used on the steering wheel. There's real care and attention to detail gone into everything. The stitching, the fitment of the pieces together, it's really rock solid. It's also a great car if you've got a nervous passenger and need to cling on to that thing. What's not quite so good is the infotainment system. Thankfully, there is now Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but the basic architecture of the dash means that this is out of reach for human beings. So everything is marshalled by this trackpad. Lexus used to have that little mouse thing, and they've gone to the trackpad, and I don't know if that's really much of a step forward. For example, let's imagine it's a cold morning, you've got up, you've set your heated seats on, and you've headed up the freeway. You get to that moment after about 10 or 15 minutes where you think, I'm not really enjoying this anymore. You want to switch them off. The process is just menu, find climate, seats, and you whiz past it each way, go across to your seat, backwards and forwards. Nope, haven't got it yet, haven't got the seat. I've given up with the seat heating, and that's how long it takes you. Your eyes are off the road a long time. It's not a great system. But there is so much else to like in here. This volume and power knob for the stereo, for example. Lexus took a load of high-end stereo hi-fi equipment, and they wanted to find which was the best feeling knob. They pulled these things apart, reverse engineered it, and this is what they came up with, and it just feels so beautifully damped. For the most part, the interior is just beautifully finished, the materials and all that. The only really bum part that I don't like is the indicators, which on the IS models are just beautiful soft touch thing, and in this,
Of course, when driving the LC500, the first question you ask is what kind of car it is. The obvious answer is it's a GT car. But Lexus couldn't help themselves from positioning it more at the sporty end of the spectrum. Despite the front suspension being softened off a little as part of a raft of model year 2020 updates, the Lexus LC500 is always that little bit firmer than you expect it to be. So you start giving it a bit of a chasing. Then you discover that there's quite a bit of heft to throw around, and the stability control interventions aren't always as subtle as you expect them to be. With a fairly long 28-70mm wheelbase, you'd expect the LC500 to feel a bit lazy through corners, but it feels surprisingly agile. That's down to two things mainly. It has a degree of rear steer, and there's also active cornering assist, which is in effect torque vectoring by braking. Yeah, it does get up on its toes a bit more smartly than you think it will. You shuttle through the drive modes using this knob up here. The car will start in normal, but you can then switch it into comfort to soften it off. But it's really, really hard to resist Sport S Plus mode because it does that all day long. Engineer Koji Sato engineered the sound of this car to replicate that of the Maserati Gran Turismo, and I think it might even sound better. The brakes on this are massive 400mm discs up front, and they're clamped by 8 piston calipers, and to be honest, you probably need all that power because 1970 kilos plus fluid and yours truly on board. This thing's tipping the scales at well over 2 tons. So let's give them a feel coming into this bend. Oh, yeah, they've got some punch.
One question that we do need to answer is whether the LC500 falls between two stools. Too big and hefty to be a convincing sports coupe, and a little too focused to be a properly syrupy GT car. That's a hard one to answer, and I expect it's the reason why you don't see too many LC500s on the road in Australia. Yes, the Lexus does an adequate job of both roles, and there might be a position in the middle of the Venn diagram for people who don't want the extremes, but rather a car that can do a serviceable job of both roles. But that sells the LC500 a little short. And just look at the thing. We were all wowed by the original Lexus LF LC concept when it appeared back in 2012. And yet the production LC looks almost as if that car rolled off its Detroit show stand and straight into your local Lexus dealer. There's always a detail here that draws your attention, whether it's the bold use of chromes, the Coke bottle flanks, the weird semi-opaque plastics, the infinity effect taillights, the perfect weave of the carbon fibre roof, these alloy wheels which glint and shimmer in the sunlight, or just the sheer otherworldliness of the cabin architecture. It's always an event.
And it might just be, sadly, the very last of its type. The 2UR GSE 5-litre V8 engine, well, it isn't going to be around forever. Although Lexus is one of those companies that hasn't put a hard and fast rule on when it stops building internal combustion engines. Yet.
The LC500 emerges as one of the best looking, best sounding and best built cars listed for sale at any price. If that's not reason enough to pique your interest, consider this. You've got the rest of your life to whir around in an EV. If the days of internal combustion are numbered, you owe it to yourself to see it out on a high. Until next time.